Welcome, everyone. Today, we are in conversation with Professor Nitin Joglekar from Boston University. He recently was the special issue editor for a POM journal, and we are just talking about understanding what was the motivation, what were some of the key findings that we got out of this special issue, and how does it take the field forward, and what are some of the implications we can get to the managers. So that's the main goal of that. Nitin, welcome again. And I also have Sriram Narayanan from Michigan State University. He has been the podcast editor and has been very active in the POM community. So welcome, Sriram.
So thank you both for doing this. I think it's a story worth sharing. So your first question, I guess, was that how did this come about? And I just want to take us back to 3 years, just as a pandemic was happening. And the editorial board really thought that it had changed not only our human lives and valuable way, but also operations in every company. People shut down operations, people restarted them in different ways, and just not in hospitals, but in factories or in general supply chains. So we wanted to capture that as an unfortunate but a real experiment, collect what was going on as data, and think about what we could learn as a community from this area. So because of that, Professor Singhal, our editor-in-chief, and Professor Kumar, our deputy editor, asked Marty, the two editors from the Humanitarian Logistics Group, Professor Martin Starr and Professor Sushil Gupta, and then two editors from Industry Study in Public Policy, Ed Anderson and I, to join together. So what I'm sharing today is really a combined wisdom of the four of us working together to think about this particular special issue.
So that's wonderful, Nitin. Could you explain briefly the key takeaways of this special issue that are especially helpful to the practitioner community?
So before we go to the key takeaway, I do want to also celebrate the fact that we got an amazing response. We got over 150 papers, and out of which we accepted 14. Plus the few which are sort of in recycle mode might show up. And what was really amazing was that this came from all across the world, 60% from the US. Just about every paper had senior scholars, and to me it's a signal that when such a crisis happened, that a majority of a community got engaged in a variety of ways to think about it. So with that, there's a lot to learn and celebrate. What your question was key takeaways. And for one of the first key takeaways was on the data set, that just about every paper that got shortlisted had a significant or 100% empirical evidence. And it was not empirical evidence from 30 years ago. It was really a fresh case evidence or statistical evidence. And that was a common theme, that we were very data-driven. In a variety of ways. The second thing was we got a mix of methods, all the way from one end machine learning, all the way to case studies. And the third thing, which is amazing, was the unit analysis. So in the accepted papers, there are papers where national policies at one level are comparing different nations on how they were doing distancing, to the levels of regional areas, Michigan versus its neighboring state, to hospital level things in certain areas, all the way to retail operations, where you're looking at queues, but if you stay longer in the queue, you might get more infection. So this different levels analysis, which is also something we're very, very fortunate to learn from. It shows that operations management techniques, supply chain techniques can have theoretical possibilities at multiple levels in a setting like this. I'll give you one more example and then I'll stop. There's a system called the Franking system. That was in Fudan where some of the early incidents were reported. And the Chinese government, what they did was they really created extra buffers, like just not distancing, but different kinds of distancing. So quarantine was handled differently than people who were in hospital, and there were data available. And there's a very famous model that was published in a top medical journal called Lancet that had 4 state variables using the famous SEIR model for diffusion and infections. And a colleague from Temple University, Professor Kong, she collaborated with somebody to figure out that you actually had multiple extra states where now the diffusion or distancing could be controlled. And she added these extra states in a manner that is amazing because it really changes the way we think about distancing. So taking what others had done and bringing operation management techniques or insights in terms of state variables, the diffusion and buffering, those kinds of ideas, and how might that change our understanding of distancing policies. And that usually wouldn't show up in a mainstream medical journal, but certainly in operations management, it's interesting and important.